Hey, good Monday afternoon. Thanks everyone for hopping on here and joining us on this Monday. We are tracking the next potential Cyclone 9, which is potentially going to be our Hurricane Helene. So this is the next thing that we're watching for to make landfall at the very end of this week. I'm here with our CEO of Hail Trace, Derik Kline. Derik, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, Taylor, I'm excited to talk about next big tropical system. This one looks like it's going to be a strong one.
Yeah. Well, I know you're excited. We had a meeting this morning and you mentioned this several times, and I was like, alrighty, we are watching this. We are ready to go. So I shared your screen, and you can just kind of take us through what you look at whenever you forecast for these things. Take us through what you really are watching for with this storm. What is unique about it? What are you keeping an eye on? I know we just got an update from the National Hurricane Center.
Yeah, I mean, I think the place to start, no matter who you are, is with the National Hurricane Center. They're obviously the experts when it comes to hurricanes. They're the drawing the cone and everything that we're going to be looking at as we go through and really continue to track this. So from a safety standpoint, from really trying to understand this system, that's a really good go-to resource for people to take advantage of. So the second update from the National Hurricane Center on this, which is right now is called a potential tropical cyclone. The reasoning behind that is it doesn't have a low level circulation yet. So it's not a cutoff low where it's just spinning around itself all by itself. So until it gets that, it won't be considered a tropical system. Now, once it gets that low level circulation, depending on what the wind speeds are, it'll either become a tropical depression or it'll become a tropical storm. So if the winds are 40 miles per hour, 39 and greater, it'll become a tropical storm. Right now, they're actually picking up winds around 35 or 40 miles per hour. So I assume we'll go directly to Tropical Storm Helene and not Tropical Depression 9. But that's possible. So the reasoning behind issuing advisories before it becomes a tropical system was it was fairly close to some different land masses, those being Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, so Cozumel, Cancun, some of those areas. It was within 36 hours of being in those locations, so they wanted to be able to go ahead and get advisories issued. And so in order to do that, we had to give it a designation, and so PTC 9 is what it was designated at. So
It's a mouthful, PTC 9. Potential tropical cyclone 9. It's a mouthful, but I know that's what we saw with this last storm as well, is that we had those high winds, but we didn't have that closed low. And so we still had to wait before they upgraded it to that tropical storm, which I know is a really big conversation on Twitter and on social media. Why haven't they upgraded it to tropical storm yet? We're kind of seeing almost the same thing with this storm as well.
Yeah, and it's very close. It has a closed circulation. It does have a closed circulation at 700 millibars. So up aloft, it is circulating, and we'll jump over and take a look at the satellite, and you'll kind of be able to see that spin on satellite. But it's mainly upper level or like a mid level circulation that it has currently. But that circulation is deepening and strengthening, and that'll go ahead and pull that to the surface as the thunderstorms continue to increase around that mid-level circulation. That'll intensify the lower level area. Eventually, it'll get stacked on top of itself. And currently forecast some of the different models that forecast strengthening. They forecast a 95% chance of rapid intensification, which it's about saying yes, it's going to happen without saying yes, it's going to happen. So
yeah.
it looks really likely.
It's so hard not to say hurricane yet, because no, this is not a hurricane right now, but we know it's going to happen. I mean, you said 95% chance of rapid intensification. We know that this will most likely get to that hurricane strength, which we can see it there. It looks like major hurricane coming into the Florida Peninsula by Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, and some might even say they're a little bit on the low side of the forecast with this particular system. I think that I know in the last discussion they said they were either at or below model consensus on the forecast. So some of that is trying to let the system go ahead and get organized before we just go crazy with the forecast. But we've seen systems take this exact path and undergo some extremely rapid intensification. And we're going to kind of dive into the forecast really, and like why is it going to rapidly intensify? Is it going to continue to intensify all the way to landfall? Is there a chance it goes east west? What are the impacts? I mean, there's a lot to unpack with this again, PTC9, but soon to be Helene.
Mm-hmm. And go for it. I know I've asked a few questions here, but I'll let you take over and do the forecast. I always learn so much in these forecasts, so I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and jump right on in. So, a couple things that that we want to just to kind of start with. So, let's look at the water temperatures. So, water temperatures out there right now. Wow, look at that bath water in the Gulf of Mexico. So, not a shocker. Right down there where the system is currently right now, just south of Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula, water temperatures around 86 to 87 degrees. Those extend all the way up into the central Gulf. The northern Gulf, though, still 85 degrees. So it's still extremely warm. And even some of that cold water that we talked about with our last system, remember as it made landfall in Louisiana, we talked about the rain creating some cooler water near the Louisiana coast. That's gone now too. Those waters have warmed back up with the sunshine and the warm, hot weather that we've had. So again, warm water in the Gulf, that's the first ingredient that we need. We got to have warm water in order to get that. Now, one other thing that I wanted to take a look here, and I'm going to navigate my way over there to it. If you haven't ever been to Mike's Spaghetti Models page, it's a great site. It has links to everything, which I just love. But I wanted to share this. This is something that I'm going to watch really, really closely with this particular system here. Let me find the link here. I feel like I know. Okay, so here it is right here. So this is the Gulf Stream. Well, it's showing different ocean currents, right? But you can see the Gulf Stream that they call this I think they call it the Gulf Loop. But you can see this kind of stream up here into the central part of the Gulf from the Yucatan, and then come back down to the south, and then go around the Florida Strait all the way up the east coast of the United States. That is extremely warm water. And the water is really deep and warm there, and this PTC9 is going to traverse right over the top of that. And so that gives it it's like having warm water and then having a little extra oomph behind the warm water. So that's something that I'm definitely watching very closely. And if you notice how far north right now that loop goes, it goes all the way up to the north of Tampa. If you're looking, across the east-west line there. So it gets very, very far to the north. And so it's going to have a lot of time for it to basically traverse and move off to under that super, super, super warm and deep warm water. So that's going to be the first thing that we're going to watch really, really closely. So we have that piece. Now, the next thing that we need to see here, and
one quick question while we're on that, with the direction that's going, is that going to help it speed up and go north faster, or are we going to see that stream dictate a west or an east flow with that? I mean, I know the warm water is going to really fuel the hurricane or eventually hurricane, but are we going to see this impact the direction that it goes?
That's a great question. So you see this, and it almost looks like a speed, right? Like it's a current, but this is actually down in the ocean. So I don't know if this might be a fun example. Those of you that have kids will know where I'm going with this. I don't know if you've ever seen Finding Nemo, and so there's the scene in the movie where Nemo jumps in with the turtles into I can't remember what they call the Australian current or whatever, and the water's like running really fast. Kind of think about this as that, right? This is like the highway in the ocean, but it won't actually steer the tropical cyclone. It's just steering the warm water. So it's helping to kind of, I guess, converge all the warm water into one area, which makes it a lot deeper. And so I think, so it doesn't move the hurricane. It just keeps the fuel for the hurricane stored in one area, and it adds a lot more fuel to it. And so if the hurricane moves over that path, it causes the hurricane to have the ability, has more fuel to it. Another example would be Sandy. A lot of people may not remember Sandy from 2011. So Sandy formed down in the Caribbean Sea, moved up over Haiti and Cuba, and then went up the East Coast. And it was a marginal hurricane until it hit the Gulf Stream up here to the north, right off of the coast of New Jersey. So you can see kind of this pool of this warm water. And as soon as Sandy went across that border into that area, it intensified extremely fast and became a very strong and very large hurricane, and one that really went down in the record books for the Northeast as just being an incredibly strong and damaging hurricane for the Northeast. So again, a lot of that fuel from the Gulf Stream, but Sandy didn't follow the Gulf Stream; it just crossed over it. And then it actually turned and went the opposite direction the Gulf Stream moves, and went into the east coast of the United States. So all of our steering from this tropical cyclone will actually come from upper level winds, high pressures and low pressures. So it's going to try to navigate its way in between high and low pressure. And we're going to get into some of those steering factors, because that's what's going to tell us exactly where Helene will end up moving. So great question. Good stuff. And please, again, feel free to ask any more questions that you have.
Yeah, and anyone who's watching as well, ask your questions. We have our comments open on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube, so we can see whenever you guys ask a question.
Absolutely. So now we're going to kind of take a look at just a couple different other things as well. So this is a floater. This is our satellite of the system, and this is visible satellite, which allows you to see some of the lower level features of this system here. And so what we're kind of looking at, we can see the cold cloud tops, the thunderstorms that are firing away here. Most of this on the east side of where we think the center is going to form, which should be somewhere off here just to the north and east of Nicaragua and Honduras. Honduras is right in here. And so it's going to form just off to the north and west, or just to the east of Jamaica. This is Jamaica, this big island here. We've got Cuba up here to the north. And then those of you that love to go over to Mexico for your vacations, there's Cozumel is right there. It's that little island. I don't know if can you guys see my cursor when I'm moving it around?
I can see it. Yep.
Okay, awesome. I didn't know if it showed that. So you got Cozumel there. Cancun is right up in here in this area. So that's the area that we're looking at. But what I want to look at, you can see the high clouds, right? Those are the ones that are kind of streaming off right up in here, and they're moving up in this direction off to the north and east. What I'm looking at is the stuff underneath it. So you see these bands moving off to the south, to the southwest. That's where I'm kind of starting to think it looks fairly broad, but we do have a layer of low level rotation with this, which is kind of getting into this being some sort of a tropical cyclone, where we could actually give it its name. But there's been like some real small eddies down here to the south, or just small rotations. So as that kind of confines itself, and that's going to happen because of this large thunderstorm cluster. So this big cluster of thunderstorms that we see, and it's still just very, very much so intensifying and getting stronger. Those are going to help to lower the pressure at the surface, and that'll give us that spin. As that pressure lowers, this cyclone will begin to spin a little bit more, and it'll form its low, and then they will stack. And so we'll begin to see the low pressure form from the surface all the way up. And as that happens, that's when we'll start to see intensification. So really, tracking this satellite is going to be important. As it gets dark, we'll lose the visible satellite side of it. But tracking the thunderstorm development, and again, the more thunderstorms we get, the stronger this system will get, and the more likely it will be to form that lower level area of low pressure. And here's kind of the other side of that. So we've had an Air Force plane flying in and throughout this system. Looks like they're still in storm right now. Yeah, actually, I think they might be flying through the center here. I'm trying to see if I can see where they're at. No, they're flying. Okay, here they go off to the northwest right now. So they're just off to the northwest. They just did a pass through the system here. And here's what they're finding. Okay, so this looks like a lot of stuff. We're going to go to the top right chart over here. So the blue line is our surface winds. And you can see we've had surface winds around 35 knots that would be tropical storm force winds. So if it were to get its low level circulation, they would probably go straight to tropical storm Helene, not to tropical depression 9. So they have found winds in that 30 to 35 knots or 35 to 40 mile per hour range. Also, the pressure is right around 1,005 millibars right now. So we're going to watch, and this is really setting the bar, right? So this is the first pass through, gives us a bar. So we know, at 4 o'clock Central Standard Time, this system was at 1,005 millibars. And so when they fly back into this, I think they had 3 flights originally planned. We'll go back and see if they've had any other flights into the system. But so as we watch each flight go through and each pass through the center of the system, we'll watch to see, does the pressure drop? And that's going to let us know the rate that the intensification, that's really the best bar to use for intensification, is the pressure that the system has. So we'll continue to watch that.
Yeah, I know that some models really wanted to bring that pressure down at landfall a few model runs ago. I don't know if that's still the case, but I think that'll be something very interesting to watch.
For sure. So, all right. So let's kind of bounce around here. So the next thing, so once we get the thunderstorms to develop and we get kind of that low level rotation and we can name it. So we've got the warm water in place. What we want to look at is we want to look at the wind shear. Is there any wind shear? And remember, that was really the problem that we had with our last system. It really encountered a lot of wind shear, had like a really small 24-hour window where the wind shear kind of laxed off, bounced its way up to about 85 to 90 mile per hour winds, and then just kind of fell off, just held right there because of the wind shear increasing in the system. It also had a lot of dry air, which that we'll get into as well as we continue to track this. But here's a look at the wind shear in the Caribbean. So right now, where PTC 9 is, not a lot of wind shear in place. It is really down to nothing, right? So right in here, nothing going on. There is a little bit of wind shear here across the Northern Caribbean, but then we move into this area of low wind shear as well there. And we can also look at the trends for wind shear in the area. And again, like I said, Mike's weather page, a great place to come and find all the fun stuff that you might want to look at. So this is our shear tendency map. And notice even in the Caribbean here, the area where the wind shear is the highest, it's actually falling off as well. So now that's in the past 24 hours. So we're going to kind of track this live as it moves to the north, and we're going to take a look at some of the wind shear in some of the different models that we'll look at as well. So, but as you can see, and this is what we're going to find when we look at the wind shear, we're not going to have a lot of wind shear with the system as it moves across the Gulf. And really, this is the same location of that Gulf current, that Gulf loop that we want to watch. They're basically going to align themselves. So the Helene, or what the future to be Helene, will move right over the Gulf loop with no wind shear. And that's why models are forecasting rapid intensification as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. And a lot of models saying it's going to be a hurricane before it even gets there. So really, really looking like things, again, probably not the best outcome or solution if you're on the northern Gulf Coast right now with what we're seeing. So look at a couple of other things here for you. So these are some of the spaghetti plots when it comes to the system, and these are some of the new ones actually coming in, and they continue to intensify. I mean, check this out.
Yeah.
A couple of them up here in the Cat 5 ballpark now. But the majority, I would say almost if not more than half, have this as a major hurricane.
Yeah.
So, so that's one piece of the puzzle, right, that we're looking at there. A couple other things here, some of the different tracks. So these are our global hurricane models. Most of them saying about 72 hours, somewhere between 72 and 96 hours. So that's the dots right here at 72, 72, 72. And then 96s are all up here. There's a couple of 72s already on shore. So that's 3 days, 3 to 4 days. This thing makes landfall. But what's interesting is look at the cluster. There's not a big range.
There's a lot of agreements with these models here. They're saying they know where they want this hurricane to make landfall. There's only a few that kind of wiggle the other way, a little to the west, a little to the east, but there's a lot of agreements with these models here.
Yeah, Yeah, and so, some of the things that I'll look at, as this forms, once the low level center forms, depending on if it forms east or west of where these little dots start, that could change. It could move the line right from east to west. So if we see this dot form, 50 miles to the west, that can move this entire track 50 miles to the west. Same thing if it forms to the east, it can move to the east. Some things to think about are land interaction, right? It's not a big gap. I want to say it's only like 100 miles, the gap from the Yucatan Peninsula to Cuba. So it's not a very far gap that separates this landmass. But if it were to cross fairly close to the Gulf Coast, both of these land masses are fairly flat in that area. So they're not mountainous. And I don't think they'll cause too much damage to the hurricane as it moves across. They might just slow the strengthening down. I don't even know if they would stop the strengthening. They would just slow it down enough. But I don't think it'll really change the intensity that's being forecasted, even if it interacts a little bit with land on either one of these peninsular / islands.
And a lot of the strengthening anyway that we're going to see is after it gets through this little corridor and it gets into some of these warmer waters, low shear, as you mentioned. That's whenever we're going to see a lot of that strengthening happening anyway.
Absolutely. The only way that the land masses would really hurt the intensity at landfall near Florida would be if they disrupted the core. And it would take a mountainous region to do that. And Cuba is a mountainous area, but it's mountainous a little bit further to the east than what this system should move across. And so that's why we're going to see really strengthening is almost a guarantee with this system as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. So yeah, so some other things too that are kind of interesting, will this curve and go into the main Florida peninsula? I don't think so. Even though we see it kind of move back to the northeast. Some things, some things just to look at are just trends over the past 100 years. This is the path they like to take when they come across the Gulf like this. The other path would be a path more into like Port Charlotte or Fort Myers area. And I don't think it's going to make that right of a turn based off the steering. That the trough is just too far to the north. That's going to go ahead and steer it back to the northeast. And the high pressure is also there blocking it. Tampa hasn't been hit with a hurricane in I want to say close to 100 years. So Tampa, for whatever reason, I don't know what the reasoning is, but I'm not going to go against it. They don't get hit with hurricanes very often. So the area that does get hit with hurricanes a lot, especially with this path, is I call it the armpit of Florida, but it's right there where you see this thing making landfall back towards like the Panama City area. And again, expect to see that continue. I think we're going to get another, which unfortunately this area has been hit multiple times, and it's been a rough stretch for the last 5 years or so for the Florida Panhandle when it comes to hurricanes.
What's the most recent hurricane that's hit over here? Do you know off the top of your head?
Well, we had a hurricane, I think this year. One of the first hurricanes made landfall right in here. And then I think we've had two or three make landfall right in this area. One was a Cat 3 last year. And I've driven I-70 east of Tallahassee. There's some pretty significant tree damage from that hurricane. We'd have to go back and look to see. I'm curious if I can find the links quickly here. Actually, I think Mike's weather page has somewhere on here all of our. Oh, you know what? I know where I saw it at. So just trying to find some of those. And so we'll go to analysis tools. This is where I saw historical data. Check out all the cool. Well, maybe not.
Well, yeah, we don't have the last 10 years.
I'm missing the good stuff.
I'm a bit surprised.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, that's not helping me out very much, is it? Well, I got excited. I thought I was going in the right direction. I guess I'm not. But anyway, there's definitely been a handful of systems that have made landfall. And then, of course, you've got Hurricane Michael, Cat 5 hurricane that made landfall near Mexico Beach, just off to the east of Panama City. So there's been a number of pretty nasty hurricanes to make landfall. The one this year I think was like a 75, 80 mile per hour. I want to say it was the C name, but I could be wrong. Trying to go off the top of my head here. So
I know I put you on the spot whenever I asked that. I was trying to help you out and look
on the spot. So I'm either a hero or a zero every time.
Well, and we are coming up on the anniversary of Michael as well here in, well, I guess it's a bit farther away, but in about 2 weeks. So yeah, I'm sure people in this area know exactly what to do whenever a hurricane is coming, because you're right, they've gotten hit by just so many hurricanes.
Right. So, it's one of those deals. I mean, I don't know. Nature doesn't lie, right? It follows patterns and different setups. So, it is what it is. So we'll see where this one ends up. But what I'll do is I'll show you just kind of some of the different things that we analyze when we're looking at the models, because there's some interesting things that we'll see. And as we get closer into the Gulf of Mexico, I'll try to break down what I feel like conditions will be like along the coast. And it won't just be impacts in the Florida Panhandle, because it'll be within 60 miles of Tampa, even though it doesn't make landfall of Tampa. And these are large systems. So right here you can see and this particular model, this is a GFS run that came out this morning. It does initialize a little bit strong. Has it at 999 millibars around 1 o'clock this afternoon. So it's a little bit strong when it comes to there, but it's fairly close to the right location, maybe a little bit further east. And we'll see as it kind of moves over there. It basically says it's just trying to figure itself out. So it's still 1,999. It's got most of the thunderstorms off to the east, but it does have some banding starting to form around 1 o'clock in the morning. Notice the rings around it now, they kind of get more centralized. They look a little bit better there. And we can take a look at the shear conditions around the system, just by kind of putting a box around it and saying what is the shear for this particular location. And it's really cool is that this will basically break down. This looks like a lot of crazy stuff on here right now that you're looking at, but it allows us to use these numbers over here to break down what the shear actually is. The moisture content is really good. That's kind of what we're seeing here. So 86%. So there is some fairly thick moisture in the area, but our shear vectors look really great as well. So that's kind of the nice part about this system here. So as it continues to run off here, I'll actually switch this here to this. So this is actually going to show us in just a different angle. So here's your shear, 16 knots, which is moderate. Max shear is 17 knots. This is at 1 a.m. As we go forward, you'll see continues to really just kind of meander, doesn't get a lot stronger, still 996. So we're still tropical storm for sure. This is 24 hours or so from right now. And then again, this is one model. Then we start to see some intensification begin to occur. So just a little bit. Here's our steering. And again, this is all the upper level stuff, letting us know. So what we see here is we've got 8 knots steering from the southeast to the northwest. So it's going to really push it through the Yucatan Channel here, right into the Gulf of Mexico. Our shear, 14 knots. So we still have some shear. It tells me that, again, while we start to get a core to develop, I don't think we're going to see rapid intensification, but I don't see a lot of dry air either. So this is our green box here. This is our moisture, and it looks very moist.
Yeah, there was much more dry air with this last hurricane than what we're seeing with this one.
Absolutely. So as we continue to move forward, now it does try to grab a little bit of dry air here, so we'll have to watch that closely, right? That could, again, it delays some of that. And notice that dry air is always going to come from the direction that the wind shear comes from. So if I back it up before the dry air really starts to try to entrain into it, like 14 knots out of the southwest was our wind shear direction. And so if it is going to get any drier, it's going to come from that way. And you can see now it is trying to intensify as well, but it's got a little bit of dry air trying to come in. But then watch as the hurricane's able to isolate itself off. It is right. I mean, it is almost right on top of Cancun at this point. That's why we have hurricane watches out right now for the Yucatan Peninsula and the Cuba, the west side of Cuba, depending on which side this system comes off. But it looks like at this point, which is around, let's see, this is 12Z on the 25th. So that's 2 days from now. So, or 2 days from this morning at 7 a.m. So this would be Wednesday morning, early Wednesday morning. This is beginning to move into the Gulf Coast. It's very close to the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. But notice the steering has come back to, it's almost a due north now steering. And our shear has also come down. So now we're in the model saying we're in green shear. So green is good or bad, depending on which one you're going for. But green is good for the hurricane, and again, looks like a hurricane at this point. Probably a low end hurricane, but it is a hurricane at this point. And then as we move into the Gulf Coast, you can see the pressure drops 979, isolated out all the moisture all the way around. Does have a little bit of dry air back here, but notice the direction of the shear. It's going to really be pushing that dry air away. But shear is also extremely light, down to 5 knots. So we have hardly any shear on the system at all. Our steering is now changed. Now it's going to take a moment for that hurricane to, it's like moving a big train. But it's going to take a minute, but it's now the steering is saying, hey, I want you to go off to the northeast. And I want you to start thinking about speeding up, right? It's time to go. So it's going to start to pick up speed, and that's going to come from an influence of a deepening trough of low pressure that's kicking out into the plains of the U.S. So the stormy weather that you're going to see, I want to say Tuesday night into the plains, it should kind of move into the Missouri Valley on Wednesday morning. That's what's actually going to it's going to grab Helene and it's going to start to pull it up to the north and push it off to the east. And so that's exactly what we'll see happening. And you'll see it with this steering box right here as we move forward. This is 7 p.m. Wednesday. Steering still at 10 knots off to the northeast. No hardly any wind shear at all. So we're still kind of stuck under this high pressure with everything stacked well. It's gotten stronger. Pressure's down to 973. The dry air is now completely vacated. There's nothing anywhere around it. And this is when we see the rapid intensification. Now we're down to 963. That's a 10 millibar drop in 6 hours. It's extremely fast strengthening. Wind shear still in the green. Notice our increase here. We're up to 15 knots now. It's 20 miles per hour. So that's a fairly quick moving system. It's right over that Gulf current. Here's Tampa right here. This is Key West and the Florida Keys, the Florida Strait right here, which is, by the way, under a tropical storm watch now, probably for some storm surge and some gusty winds up to around 40 miles per hour. And that will be occurring at this point. Okay, so this is 1 a.m. on Thursday morning. This is with this particular model. I want to say, let me double check and make sure Thursday is the 26th. Yeah, okay, just making sure. So Thursday morning, this model has the hurricane directly to the west of the Florida Keys. It's, so again, Florida Keys, you're getting some squally weather, maybe some water spouts and some tornadoes possible. But definitely you're going to see some elevated water in the 1 to 3 foot range. And then you're going to see some winds again around, and some of the squalls up to 40 or 45 miles per hour. So nothing you haven't seen before, but it's probably not going to be a fun weather day on Thursday in the Florida Keys, really starting Wednesday night. So as we continue to move forward here, again, the steering now up to 19 knots. Max shear is now, so shear is starting to come up on the system, but we're still, shear across the whole system is still low, only at 9 knots. Our relative humidity is perfect all the way through the system. It's got really great moisture. But notice the shear is out of the northwest now. And notice where the dry air is. It's off to the northwest. So we'll have to watch that closely because that could, again, inhibit this system. But we still intensified. We're down to 954. That's a strong hurricane. That's a major hurricane most likely. And again, a major hurricane before the National Hurricane Center has it forecasted to be. So that's 12Z, that's 7 a.m. So if you're in Tampa now, you're getting squally weather, again, probably Wednesday night, but definitely by Saturday or by Thursday morning. And winds, you're going to have some gust in that low 40 range, and you're going to have some water starting to increase there in Tampa Bay as it continues to move off. Still intensifying 940, but now the wind shear from the trough is now kicking in. So we do expect wind shear to increase as this gets close to the coast, but again, potentially a little too late with this particular system as again, we're down to 947. It's isolated itself so well that it's going to take a good 12 to 24 hours for the wind shear to actually have any impact on it. And that's what we're seeing here. So that wind shear is up to 15 knots now, moderate wind shear, steering to the northeast at 28 knots. It won't be moving at 28 knots, but steering is definitely wanting this thing to move fairly quickly. Now as that trough low pressure is really wanting to grab it and pull it to the north. And then, I mean, look how fast. I mean, we were down by Key West at 7 a.m. on Thursday, and at 7 p.m. on Thursday, it's making landfall. So it moves the whole length of Florida in a 12-hour period, makes landfall as, again, a Cat 3 or Cat 4 hurricane. And by this point, it's now undergoing strong wind shear. The effects of landfall and the strong wind shear will cause it to rapidly decrease in intensity. But it hasn't making landfall as a Cat 3 or even a Cat 4 hurricane, and expect for that to have major impacts. Now, if it landfalls right where the GFS, which is really an eastern outlier, it has it much further east, it would have stronger impacts on Tampa if it takes this track, where you might see some tropical storm, maybe even some gust to hurricane force if it gets just close enough. But the big impacts coming again right up there into Florida, but a fairly unpopulated part of Florida. Doesn't mean it doesn't impact the people that are in that area, but that would be a fairly unpopulated and probably a lower impact hit for the state of Florida. But again, this is an eastern outlier. Most of the models have this making landfall further west, closer towards Panama City.
That goes great into one of the questions that we have on here. We have Tornado Grammy, great username, by the way, says, I moved here immediately after Sally, and I'm concerned with this one. She says that she is in Pensacola, and the question is about the impacts in Pensacola area.
Yeah, so a lot of that depends on the track. I can't say I was in Sally. I did chase Hurricane Sally, slow moving hurricane. Only moved, I think I want to say 2 miles per hour, and took forever to make landfall and then just set. In fact, we got in the eye of Hurricane Sally around 3 a.m, and we woke up, and then we're like, oh, we did it, and we went to sleep. And then we woke up in the morning around 7:30 at sunrise, and I just kind of assumed that the hurricane had already passed. And started kind of driving around to see what the impacts were. And then all of a sudden the wind started really picking up, and we realized, oh, the eye just now moved. We're just now getting out of the eye. Like we slept for 4 hours in the eye before the backside actually came on. So
that can be one of your fun facts. Like you spent the night in the eye of a hurricane.
Yeah, right. This is just a slow mover. Just crazy how slow some of these can move. This one will not be that slow. So if we have landfall anywhere from really, I would say Panama City Beach to the east, if you're in Pensacola, I wouldn't expect tremendous impact. You get a little bit of rain, some squalls, you have some gusty winds, but when I say gusty winds, 30, 40 miles an hour. So nothing crazy at all. There won't be a storm surge. Everything will be offshore in that area. So it'll be a fairly low impact. You won't need to evacuate or anything like that. Now, if it shifts to the west, then I think it is something that we have to watch out for. So, and right now, my target zone would be the eastern side would be about where you see this making landfall right here. I think that's about as far east as we'll see on this system. And the western side I would say I don't think this, but as far west as I'm willing to go is probably Mobile, Alabama. So I do think it could shift all the way back to Pensacola. I don't think it's likely though. I think most likely area is probably going to be, unfortunately, near Panama City or just to the east of Panama City. Um, but we'll see. I do think somewhere in the Florida Panhandle though has the best chance, but most likely east of Pensacola. Great question.
Yeah, and a lot of I think, yeah, you're right. The GFS has this, which is the model that we're looking at right now, is a little farther over to the east than the rest of them. But there's a lot of agreements to shift this just to the west of where you see now, and that's where landfall in like the eastern side of the Panhandle.
Yeah, here's kind of so the GFS that we're looking at is this. I want to say it's this green one right here. That's all the way over on the right side.
Yeah.
And we've got one that's, Pensacola is right here on the tip of Florida. So there are no models right now at Pensacola. And I don't think that's very likely. Um, but just using trends and some of that stuff, I think Mobile is not completely out of the land of possibility, although I think it's less than 5% chance. And same with Pensacola, I think they're fairly low. You typically, to get a Pensacola Mobile landfall, you want to see this moving more of a west to east, maybe through the Florida Strait, and then having to make that bend or curve to the north. But because it's making that bend or curve down here south of Cuba, basically, you can see how it's moving northwest and then kind of curves back to the northeast. Because it's making that curve, I think landfall is more likely to be in the central Florida Panhandle.
Sense. Yeah. Well, if anyone else has weather questions, go ahead and stick those in the comment section. Derik, I know we're a little over our time that we have you here for. So anything else, any last forecasting or any other cool models or anything else that you want to show us here?
Well, no, I think, the big thing is going to be just watching, kind of flipping through all my screens here just to make sure. But the biggest thing is going to be just really just watching this satellite here for the next little bit. My next big question is, where does the center form? And I think we're getting close to having that answer. I think we have a pretty good confidence that that's going to form right in this location. And so just kind of waiting for that to happen. But it's very, very close. I think it happens in the next 6 hours or so. And then the models will be able to lock onto that center location and really start to make some better forecasting. And so I think tomorrow we might see some shifts in a few different things, including intensity and landfall location. So we'll continue to watch for that. But I think, the big keys with this system is we've almost got a low level center on it now. We've got extremely warm water. We've got low shear and a moist environment for it to work with. Everything says get ready for a major hurricane.
Yeah. Well, and we'll be thinking about everyone in Florida who is dealing with that over the next few days. One thing I did want to mention, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this while we were on live today. Have you heard about on social media about the Fujiwara effect happening after this makes landfall? Have you seen this?
I have. Well, I haven't been on social media, but I have heard it, and I actually saw it in the forecast and assumed that's what we were going to see happening. So let's go look at the where is, I got too many tabs open. Here we go. So that is actually what you're seeing. So what's going to happen is we're going to have this trough of low pressure that we talked about in the plains. That's actually going to push this to the northeast. But then as it ejects out, it's going to leave a trailing front back here into Missouri, and then we should have a low pressure back here in Missouri somewhere ish, right? And so as this system comes up, it's going to get pulled into the circulation of the low pressure as well. And so you'll actually have a low pressure spinning and then another low pressure that will try to basically spin around it and then get engulfed into it. Really, really neat. Really fun weather thing that happens. What it means for everybody in Illinois or maybe Indiana or Kentucky or Missouri or Arkansas, Tennessee, somewhere in that area, it could mean a lot of rain.
A lot of rain.
A lot of rain. So we'll see where that track ends up at, and I would say at 5 days out, definitely less confident in that scenario happening. Another version of this scenario is, and it's not forecasted in the cone right now, but is that the trough actually grabs hold of the system. And if it does that, it would pull it up across North Carolina into the Northeast. So you can see that. You can see it's literally a change in the cone track that much to where, 2 p.m. Saturday is actually near Long Island or Massachusetts. How about that? So
Wow.
that's how much a big change in just being able to grab hold of the system is. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen right now. I think the system's going to move slow or quick enough to go ahead and miss that. But it's possible. So we'll see how this thing works out.
I don't want to be the National Hurricane Center right now saying, it could end up in Illinois or it could end up in Long Island.
Right. So lots of crazy. I mean, everybody that's watching has seen what we can do with a forecast and what we can't do with a forecast sometimes. So
yeah, we're still several days out. So we'll, of course, be keeping everyone updated. Thanks for joining us today, everyone who watched. And Derik, thank you for giving your time and your expertise on this as well. I'm sure we'll do many more of these. So everyone who's watching, make sure you hit that follow button. Make sure that you are getting our updates. You can also hit the notification button so you will know whenever we are live. Derik, we appreciate you hopping on here today. We'll keep everyone updated on any updates that we get from the National Hurricane Center. When this turns into a tropical storm, we'll be putting that on our social media. Hurricane, it'll be on our social media.
That's right. Thank you.
All right.